All right. Welcome to the Elder Council podcast. This is episode 2. My name is Jesse. This is the podcast where we talk about D&D in its entirety, at least as far as it relates to my interests, which mainly lie in running the game, news around the game, the lore of the game and its surrounding things, I guess. And I'm also a little bit interested in other role-playing games and game design in general. We'll be talking about some interesting things today, namely the upcoming adventure in my live actual play campaign every Wednesday. I'm creating the new adventure and writing it as we speak and got some cool ideas about that. I won't spoil it for anybody. We'll also be talking about the upcoming release, Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, the book that comes out next week that's all about some of my favorite D&D lore and topics, and we'll talk about what they're changing and what I'm expecting and what I'm hoping to get out of that book. And then to wrap it all up, we'll do our quick glance at the monster manual and talk about one of the coolest monsters in D&D history, one that's been around since, I think, all the way back since 74 or 75 at least. And it has its origins in some stuff that's even much older than that as far as the source material goes. So welcome. Thank you for being here. This is a live podcast, so if you're watching this after the fact or listening to it on your podcast app or checking it out on YouTube or whatever, we do record this live every Thursday night over on twitch.tv/eldercouncil at starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. Definitely come check it out if you're watching this after the fact. If you are checking out later, be sure to comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave some feedback if you wouldn't mind. I definitely appreciate it, and check it out and use everything that I can to improve the quality of the show. So what I want to start with, and just get it out of the way really quick before we get into the Baldur's Gate stuff and the monster manual stuff. The live campaign that we've been playing just wrapped up its last adventure. They got to level 6, and the way that I've been structuring the campaign, we've kind of been doing, an adventure or two here and there, go off, do the thing, get the loot, come back, and then do the downtime and the shopping and leveling up and all that good stuff. And it's been pretty standard dungeon crawly type stuff. So I wanted to do for the next one, this next adventure is going to be a little bit out of the box, and it's going to be kind of illusion and puzzle based, which so far the campaign has been very heavily, classic dungeon crawling and combat oriented. So I'm super excited to figure out the best way to kind of introduce not only the campaign, but the players and the stream to this more puzzle and illusion solving idea for a dungeon. It's still going to have, plenty of bad guys and monsters and cool combat stuff and maps and all that good jazz, but a little bit out of the ordinary, at least as far as the stream has been so far. So I'm super excited about that. The adventure is going to be called Castle Bronze. When it's all finished, by next Wednesday, at least the first session of it will be finished, or the introduction to it, how the players will actually get there and begin and all that. I'll be posting the maps and the creature stat blocks and all that stuff. Everything that I homebrew for this adventure will be posted up on the Patreon. You can find that patreon.com/theeldercouncil. Most of it's free, a lot of the maps and stuff like that, and I post my DM session notes and all that good stuff over there free, and I post daily updates about what I'm working on and all that good stuff. So it's a good place for like a central hub on what I'm doing, reminders about the podcast, and pretty much everything else that I'm doing D&D related. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to touch on as far as stuff that I'm working on. Oh, I guess the world building stream, I might as well mention for anyone that's checking this out to also come by the streams on Twitch every Tuesday at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern. And instead of the live podcast, we do a live community event every week where we work on some world building, kind of a big communal brainstorming session where we come up with cool ideas for crafting our own homebrewed campaign setting and world for use in 5th edition, or I guess whatever role-playing system you would want to run it in. And so far we've just kind of came up with this collective idea to come up with all the cool origin story ideas for this world, and then in the end, when we have just this giant pile of ideas, we'll go through and do like straw polls and different sorting ways to figure out what we all like, and then we'll kind of go from there and add on to this world totally from the ground up. We're going to design the pantheon of gods, the continents, the maps, the the weather, everything to do with this campaign setting, and then I'll actually put it together in a PDF style format and release it for everyone so that we can have anyone who's interested run games in this world that we all helped create together. And I think that's going to be super fun, super interesting. And if it works out, maybe we'll run the next live stream campaign in the setting that we created on the channel as well. I think that would be a lot of fun. But it's been fun just brainstorming and hanging out with you guys and getting your ideas on stuff. So far, some little previews into what we've come up with. If you haven't checked it out yet, players, I guess not players, but the fellow world builders have chimed in with some really cool ideas on the solar system of the plane that we're coming up with, thinking that maybe it has two suns, and then that got people thinking into how the magic system works, and that maybe there's one sun that kind of emits the divine magic and one sun that emits the arcane magic for the world. And the clerics, paladins, and that type of thing get their magic from the divine sun, and maybe the wizards and sorcerers get the magic from the arcane sun. And we're just kind of it's just snowballing and growing really cool ideas from there. And none of it is concrete yet, we may scrap all of that in the end, but we're just brainstorming and getting some really fun, creative ideas flowing. And I've been enjoying it a lot. It's actually been giving me some really cool ideas for my personal campaign setting that I'm working on, Triune, which I will talk more in depth about in next week's episode. I'm going to be talking about the book that I'm going to be writing in that campaign setting, and we'll be talking a little bit about the custom homebrew content I'm creating, and dive a little bit into kind of the podcast will be about homebrew, the right and wrong ways to do it, if you should do it, should you allow it in your campaigns, and that kind of stuff. So we'll get into that next week. I'm pretty excited about that. I'm a big fan of homebrewing things, but I'm also a big fan of official release content and how balanced it tends to be if you play it correctly. Although I'm not like a crazy rules stickler as a DM or anything, and we'll get into my DM philosophies the further this podcast goes on. I don't want to bore you guys with just droning on about how I like to run the game. We'll get into it over time, and you'll learn as we talk about different, more interesting topics. I think that's the best way to do it. So, the main thing that I wanted to talk about today, Baldur's Gate: Descent into Avernus. This is the upcoming book that comes out next week. It's an adventure module. It's not a source book. So this is a level 1 to 13 adventure, and the little tag paragraph for it is: "Welcome to Baldur's Gate, a city of ambition and corruption situated at the crossroads of the Sword Coast." You all know what Baldur's Gate is if you've played in a Faerun or Sword Coast adventure, Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, all of that stuff. The video games, of course, many people have played Baldur's Gate. I actually haven't played those games yet. I know that sounds crazy. Those games are right up my alley for the type of games that I like, but somehow I just haven't played them yet. Maybe we'll play them here on the Twitch channel on Sundays before the new Baldur's Gate 3 comes out. Just do a speed playthrough of all of them to prepare for the new game. I think that'd be a lot of fun. But it says, "You've just started your adventuring career, but already find yourself embroiled in a plot that sprawls from the shadows of Baldur's Gate to the front lines of the plane-spanning Blood War." And this is why I'm interested in talking about this today. The Blood War is, a lot of people think it's kind of played out and overdone. They've been talking about it for a long time in D&D lore, but it's probably my favorite thing in D&D lore. I'm super into that, super cheesy edgelord stuff as far as demons and devils and angels and all that. I'm just an absolute nerd when it comes to religious mythology and hell and divine comedy inspired Dante's Inferno-esque mythology and characters, and I just love that kind of stuff, and that's what the Blood War is all about. Do you have what it takes to turn infernal war machines and nefarious contracts against the archdevil Zariel and her diabolical hordes? And can you ever hope to find your way home safely when pitted against the infinite evils of the Nine Hells? So this comes out next week, I believe the 17th, which if you're listening to this live is 5 days from now. So what is that, next Tuesday it comes out? Man, that's soon. I'm super excited for this. It looks like they've got a lot of really cool additional stuff that comes with this. There's like a dice tray that you can get on the side. There's some incredible minis. As always, they put out the new line of minis with each book and all that stuff that you got to get. Super cool. And the alternate cover book that they put out, that Hydro74 illustrated the cover for, I have all of his core rule books that he did, the Monster Manual, DMG, and the Player's Handbook. They're incredible. I love his art style, that just super simplified, like really, really gorgeous, evil looking style that he is known for. Can't wait to get my hands on his version of this new adventure module. But it's level 1 to 13, and obviously it says you start out in Baldur's Gate, and then eventually you'll find your way not only making it into the first level of the Nine Hells, but you will maybe be making contracts with archdevils like Zariel and some of her minions and stuff like that, that's a pretty big difference in power level of a campaign. I'm excited to see how they do it as far as their adventure writing goes. That's something that I'm working on myself in my own campaign setting, and my own writing is balancing adventures. It's more difficult than you think if you're really trying to make a good long campaign that starts at a low level and goes up into the higher tiers of play. So I'm excited to see how they do that. I'm also just excited to see their descriptions of the different locations of hell. I've seen some of the sneak preview pictures of the maps from this book, and they look amazing. Can't wait to check those out, and some of the stat guides and stuff. But to what I was saying before, the Blood War, which, just a real quick and nitty gritty rundown of this, if any of you are not familiar with that, is kind of the whole background story lore to this book. The Blood War is the war between the demons of the abyss and the devils of the Nine Hells, which in D&D lore, they're not the same thing. Commonly in pop culture, the things that inhabit hell people call demons. But in D&D, they're devils. The typical things that are running around in the fiery hells are called devils. The abyss is a little bit of a different, this infinite negative energy plane of chaos and disarray and destruction and death and blackness is the home of demons, and they are more about spreading their corruption and chaos, while the devils of hell are a very structured organization. Even though they are evil, they are, the embodiment of lawful evil. And the Blood War is this constant chaotic conflict between law and chaos, with the demons of the abyss trying to invade Avernus, which is the frontline first level of the Nine Hells. So it's this constant battle between both sides of evil, and it's kind of said in the lore that they're so evenly matched that this battle has just been waged forever, and it will continue to be an ongoing war. But if one side were to win, they would just be unstoppable by the rest of the cosmos and the rest of the powers that be. So every side of every faction in the universe of the angels, the gods, everyone kind of can't help one side or the other to win this thing, because if they do, if the demons kill the devils, then they will just overrun hell, and they'll have so much power that they'll overrun everywhere else too. So it's actually good for everyone to keep both sides kind of busy with this conflict, so everyone else can go about their business. So what I'm guessing is the origin story of this book is all about the archdevil Zariel, who is kind of the overlord of this first level of the Nine Hells, Avernus. She actually started as one of the angels from whatever Mount Celestia or whatever they call the heavens. She was one of the archangels and one of the like war ones, one of the generals, I guess. I'm not exactly sure about the terminology that they use, but she was one of the like, the big powerful battling archangels, and was just sick and tired of evil being left to run amok by the higher up gods, and she was sick of seeing them just allowed to continue causing their death and destruction, even though they're mostly busy with the blood war. Evil people are still out there doing their evil things in the name of these demons and devils. So Zariel decided to take it upon herself to turn the tides of this blood war and go down and take out both sides while they're busy. So she took like this legion of her angelic army and just crashed right into the middle of the front line of the battlefield of Avernus, and ended up getting kind of trapped in this giant battle and unable to make it out. And I think she got overrun and captured by the devils and lost her angelic powers and got turned into one of the archdevils. I think she was kind of forced to make a deal with Asmodeus, the leader and ruler of the nine hells. In order to keep her life and her power, she was forced to rule Avernus forever as the leader of this giant devil army and the frontline general. So I guess maybe she'll either be the big bad end boss of this campaign, or someone that you have to make a contract with to try to survive the hells. But I'm super excited to see what all that entails. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and that kind of blood war lore and story is super interesting to me. I'm really looking forward to seeing if they added the Yugoloths into this campaign book at all. They are the ferrymen of the river Styx that runs through the nine hells and is kind of the gateway that the demons from the abyss use to get into Avernus. It's a river that runs through many different of the negative planes, so the demons kind of like get into Avernus through this river, and I think they often take passage on the ferries of the Yugoloths, which are like, whereas the devils are lawful evil and the demons are chaotic evil, the Yugoloths are just plain neutral evil, I think, and they're just totally self-serving and collecting money in exchange for all of these deals that they do for both sides of the war. They're kind of like the mercenary group of the blood war, in that they will do deals for either side depending on who's the higher bidder, and they will even change sides in the middle of a battle based on coin and stuff like that. And I think that there's a little bit of that lore and maybe even some encounters based on Yugoloths in this book. I'm not 100% certain about that, but I think when I watched the live preview show about them playing some games based on this book, I think that they brought it up a little bit. So I'm looking forward to seeing exactly how much they put in based on that. Okay, so let me just remind everybody again while you're here, thank you so much for being here. This is being recorded live over on Twitch every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. So if you're checking this out live, thanks for being here. And if you're watching it after the fact on YouTube or listening to it on your podcast app, come check it out during the recording. It's a lot of fun, and we have the chat going here. Thank you so much for everyone for being here. I do have some questions that obviously they won't be answered today, but just some questions I've been mulling around in my head about this book, Descent into Avernus. I don't know if it has anything to do with the upcoming Baldur's Gate game that we were talking about earlier. I don't particularly think that it does. Maybe it's them setting up for that game. In the trailer for the game and everything, it seemed like that the game would be heavily inside, like the underbelly of the city, and the city's being taken over by Mind Flayers, and it's like a real heavy, dark, Mind Flayer-y type of a game. And this book, obviously, it's like you're in Baldur's Gate, and then I think something happens and you go, and the campaign goes into Avernus, and that's kind of where it stays. I don't know that for sure. I don't know if you go back and forth from Baldur's Gate into Hell. That would be weird, but kind of cool if they could pull it off. but I don't think that they have anything to do with each other. I would be very surprised if this book has anything to do with Mind Flayers at all. So I'm very interested to see if they just randomly are doing a Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus adventure and the Baldur's Gate 3 video game, or if they it's Wizards, you would think that they have to have something to do with each other for marketing purposes, but who can be sure? So I'll have to do some more research into that, and I guess once this comes out, maybe they'll be more willing to talk about that when it gets closer to the release of the video game. So that's something to keep an eye on, and again, like I said, maybe we'll be playing all of those games on the channel here just to get ready for it to come out. Pretty excited about it. It will be I'll definitely be playing Baldur's Gate 3. I just don't know if I'm going to be streaming the first two beforehand to get ready for it. I think I will. It sounds like a lot of fun, and it'll be like my first experience with those games, even though I am a big fan of the, CRPG computer game genre. Let's see. I don't think that I missed anything that I wanted to talk about as far as the book goes. And while we are recording these podcasts live, if there's any direct questions or comments about, the topic at hand that we're talking about, I'll chime in and bring it up based on the chat and stuff like that. If there's anyone, if people just stop in and are just randomly talking and chatting and stuff like that, it's a little bit more difficult for me to focus on the stuff that's happening in the chat. So don't feel bad if I don't acknowledge anything. I do see everything that's being written and stuff. I just can't interrupt the show to focus on every single thing that's being said. But if someone says something that's kind of on brand or on point for what we're talking about, I'll try to give you a little bit of a reply. So for the rest of the show, I have just one thing that I want to talk about. We're going to do our quick glance into the monster manual. So let me switch something over really quick. Today we're going to be talking about none other than the enemy we were just talking about that's going to be in the Baldur's Gate video game, the Mind Flayer. Commonly known and originally, I think, known as the Illithids. The Mind Flayers are a race that was, I guess, created by Gygax originally in, I want to say, 74. They were in, the first editions of D&D back in the day, and he kind of created them, what I believe was based on some characters from a book that he had read at the time, some sci-fi book. But those characters, I can't exactly remember what they were called, but those characters from the book were based on some, Lovecraft mythos and based on monsters from the Cthulhu kind of universe. So there has always been that direct connection in between Illithids and the kind of cosmic horror universe and Cthulhu and all of that. So that still is where people like to place them, and that's kind of their thing, is being the alien, commonly known tentacle monsters. But I think they're more interesting than just that. You don't always just have to use them in that kind of a way, although I think they are almost underrated nowadays because they're so common in pop culture and in D&D culture, and not really like pop culture, not mainstream culture is not really talking about Illithids very much, but a little bit actually, and we will talk about that because of their prevalence or lack thereof, I guess, in Stranger Things has kind of changed how people feel about these things a little bit. But not to get too off topic, they, like I said, they've been around forever, created by Gygax back in the day, but really based on stuff much older than that. Mind Flayers are really, really interesting. The base Mind Flayer stat block, and this we'll get into a little bit. We talked about it last time, but the way that I'm going to talk about monsters or enemies or bosses or whatever in the dungeon, in the monster manual glance section of the podcast every week, I'm not going to give you the whole rundown of exactly how this monster works and what it is and every word from its stat block in the manual. There's lots of podcasts and shows and stuff that do that. My interests lie mostly in, sometimes the origin of the monster, where it came from, how it got designed. I really like that. But also how to run it in your game and make it work for you, because I don't think that that is always the same in every campaign, right? You can't plug a Mind Flayer into every campaign and have it make sense and have it work smoothly and have your players enjoy it. That's probably the most important part. And I don't mean enjoy it as in they're not going to be happy that the Mind Flayer showed up and they have to fight it, but at least they will be like, okay, cool. This thematically, this makes sense. Everything that we've been doing has led up to this moment, and I think that's a cool thing. So we do have to get a little bit into the mechanics of the thing. Mind flayers are probably my favorite like monster type in the game. Aberration, which, if you are unfamiliar, aberrations are the mostly used for the strange alien type things. Aboleths, mind flayers, anything that's weird and tentacly and alien, or lives underwater, or uses psychic powers, anything like that. Beholders, I believe, may even be. Yeah, for sure, beholders are right. Aberrations. Just anything weird and alien. And it's just one of my favorite things to read up on and hopefully get to use in a campaign someday soon. The campaign we've been running now has been a little bit more on the like heroic fantasy side of things instead of the cosmic horror, when I really do love me some cosmic horror. So I'm gonna have to do a astral sea Mind Flayer campaign sometime here soon. That would be awesome. But they are aberrations, and according to the monster manual, they are lawful evil, which I'm a bigger fan of the alignment system than a lot of people that I've talked to. Although I don't think it almost ever matters when you're just running your bosses and stuff for your campaigns. But they have AC 15, 71 hit points, 30 feet of speed. That's all your standard stuff there. What I think is interesting about these Mind Flayers as your maybe like a low level campaign big bad end boss of the campaign is that they are deceptive in a lot of ways, much like the creature that we talked about last week, the ancient red dragon. Although I think there's a lot more play to the Mind Flayer than the Ancient Red Dragon, right? Like, you can't really spring an Ancient Red Dragon on your low level party so much. You're just gonna have a bad time. The Mind Flayer is a CR of 7, which I'm not a huge fan of the CR system, but you can figure it out and utilize it in a pretty good way if you know what you're doing. It just takes some practice. Apparently, I guess a good rule of thumb is like whatever the CR is like in this case 7. It means a 4-player party of all 7th level characters. That would be like an equivalent match for this. But where the Mind Flayer is deceptive, I believe, and this goes for a lot of things as far as CR goes, if you as a DM really set this up and give the Mind Flayer a lair and give it time to prepare for this battle and play it really smartly, I really think a Mind Flayer could both totally wreck a 7th level party, and if the players are prepared and know what they're doing, a 7th level party could absolutely no problem take out a Mind Flayer. I think even a probably 4th or 5th level party could easily kill a Mind Flayer because they only have 71 hit points and all of that stuff. So the way to run these in your game is going to depend on what you're going for, but quick rule of thumb, don't put one Mind Flayer against your party. Put a Mind Flayer and its minions and its monsters and things in its lair. Don't ever make your boss battle one thing versus the party, because the way that 5th edition works, probably even like a 2nd or 3rd level party could kill a Mind Flayer if there's enough of the party versus the one Mind Flayer, just because of the way that the action economy works. 6 players all get to take a turn before the Mind Flayer does anything. It's going to be halfway dead, and then it's going to take its turn, and maybe it'll kill one player, but then the rest of the party's going to kill it on their turn. So you have to be smart about things, maybe homebrew some extra abilities so the Mind Flayer gets to, use some of its psychic powers, its psionics, on opponents' turns, like maybe give it some legendary actions like higher level bosses have, or give it some minions, make some more aberration little lower level monsters to take up some of that action economy and move and use their turns in between the players' turns, so the players can't always just focus down the boss and burst fire it down. That's just general DM tips from me in general on running any boss. Specifically, when you're talking about Mind Flayers, the interesting thing that they do, at least in your standard lore, they're like hive mind colonist type things. They like to send out their dreadnoughts, these squid ships, and invade new worlds and send a legion of a couple of Mind Flayers, and then they will slowly over time infect this world and turn more people into Mind Flayers through their what is it called, they infect the brain. It's kind of like a face hugger type thing from Alien, but they go in and send out a little alien spawn thing, and it goes into the brain and turns the infected person into a Mind Flayer as well. And they like to grow their numbers and then start the colony that's all worshipping and growing the elder brain. Mostly the elder brain, it says here, most Illithids belong to a colony of sibling Mind Flayers devoted to the elder brain, a massive brain-like being that resides in a briny pool near the center of a Mind Flayer community. So commonly, the way I've seen it done, the dreadnought, the ship, the spaceship of the Illithid, will land in a deserted area in the middle of a forest or a cave or a mountain or something like that, and then the elder brain will set up shop and start kind of sending out its psychic corruption into the lands and turning people onto its side and slowly growing and growing from there. I think that's a pretty cool way to do it. I also like the idea, this says solitary Mind Flayers are likely rogues and outcasts. I really like the idea of rogue Mind Flayers setting up shop and trying to corrupt worlds and kind of use their political prowess, use their psionic abilities and mind control to influence the entire world from a political perspective, and not just an evil growing the elder brain colony. That's a very, I think, basic way to run it, is oh no, there's a Mind Flayer colony, we need to stop it, and that just turns into sacking another dungeon and going on a dungeon crawl to kill the big boss at the end. I think if you do, you're going to learn over the future episodes of this podcast, I'm a big fan of political intrigue campaigns, and I think that there's ways to do it for people who are not quite as interested in D&D politics and role playing and stuff like that, and there's ways to do it for people who are, and for people who aren't quite so into dungeon crawling, and you can do a good mix of both. And I think having the big bad Mind Flayer who's corrupting people from behind the scenes, and it doesn't always have to mean that they've mind controlled the king and taken over his brain and now they're ruling the kingdom. Maybe they just corrupted one guard in the top elite, like King's Guard, and now there's a corrupt guard on the force, and the players have to deal with that when they're doing some adventuring for the big city in your campaign or whatever. There's lots of ways to possibly do it, but I just think the best way to think about Mind Flayers is think of them as almost supremely intelligent. The only things that are really going to be smarter than these guys are going to be super ancient dragon type enemies, aboleths, things that have been around for thousands and thousands of years. Mind Flayers are intelligent because of their psionic abilities and the whole hive mind thing. When they're around each other or other intelligent beings, they can kind of feed off of that energy, and they also extract the brain of their enemies and feed on it, and it kind of grows their intelligence as well. They're super interesting, and I think there's a lot of cool ways to run the Mind Flayer. They have some cool abilities, and I think they have some abilities that I hope that D&D gets more into in the future. Obviously, these guys have been around for a long time, but 5e still really doesn't have a whole lot of psionic stuff added into it. Obviously, if you've been following the news of the most recent Unearthed Arcana subclasses, which we spoke about in last week's episode, it seems like they're starting to get into it a little bit with that sorcerer subclass having some psionic powers. But I'm super interested to see whether they go with that. And it seems like people have been really like crying for 5th edition Dark Sun more and more. So I would imagine here in the next couple years they're going to try to go back to Dark Sun and do a 5e version of that. And you can't do Dark Sun without psionics. So I think they're probably testing and getting ready for that in some way. Maybe it'll be a new setting, new flavor of a psionic, Dark Sun like campaign setting, but something similar would be very exciting. But psionics, for anyone that doesn't know, it's like innate spell casting. So like a sorcerer just naturally has their magical ability. Psionics are like intelligence based innate spell casting, where you don't have components or anything because you're not casting some magical spell. You are using like mind powers. It's like Professor X would be like a psionic telepath type of a guy, instead of like a pyromancer who summons fireball spells. So psionics are super interesting, and that's kind of the type of magic that Mind Flayers use. They have like mind blasts and mind control and that kind of thing. So think of them as, if there was a giant evil Professor X who was the bad guy of your campaign, try to get into the head of that type of character and run them smartly. They're not going to get into a battle like your big end final battle of your campaign. If you're using a Mind Flayer as your end boss, they're not just gonna like sneak up on him and find him in a room by himself and kill him, right? That would not be the intelligence and cunning expected of a Mind Flayer. This guy's going to be ready. He probably isn't even going to be in that cave room when they go to get him. He'll be outside the cave waiting to like spring the trap on them when they figure out he's not home and leave, right? The Mind Flayer is trying to always be a couple steps ahead and really play into that. And you can give your players plenty of hints that that's what's happening and time to prepare so that they're not, caught totally off guard and just brutally savaged and murdered by this thing, which, it's always a possibility. But I think the best way to do it is give your players plenty of information, like give them those political hints, like that they've been catching some corrupted guards, or that the guards witnessed one of their fellow men get turned into an Illithid and flee the city, and that kind of stuff is happening. So give them plenty of time to prepare and kind of level up and get their bearings, but then really don't hold back and let the Mind Flayer be what it is supposed to be, which is this super intelligent, plotting, cunning, crafty, just crazy genius, monster. Obviously there's plenty of resources and books and information about running them. I just think that they're one of the coolest and most iconic monsters in D&D. And for these first, 5 or 10 episodes, I would really like to go over what I think are the most iconic and classic D&D creatures before we go off the deep end into the crazy unknown ones that I like, some of the homebrew ones that I've seen, some of the ones that I want to create. We'll go over, we've done Dragon so far. We'll do Mind Flayer and Beholders, some Undead, all the classic good stuff. Mimics, absolutely. Someone suggested Mimics in the chat. Thank you for that. Mimics, maybe we'll talk about in the next week or two. Beholders are real high up on the list. Mimics personally are one of my favorites. I think I'm on the Mind Flayer page in the monster manual right now. I think Mimics are right above them. Yes. Mimics are super cool, and we could probably actually just do a whole episode of the podcast just about Mimics because of how many cool uses there are for them, how many influences and resources there are on them. And I won't get too into it now. I'm a huge fan of, Dark Souls and games like that. So Mimics are really near and dear to me, and I try to not overuse them, even though I want to in my campaigns, because the best thing about Mimics is when the players aren't expecting them. And the last time I used one in my campaign, the players also all mentioned it, like, oh man, we haven't you haven't got us in a while, and none of us were thinking about it. And and they just went up, and they even seemed suspicious of a chest before they opened it, and they're like, and they just grabbed it and opened it, and I got them, and it was like super satisfying, and that's always so much fun to do. So we will definitely talk more about mimics in the future. But for now, I think let me check my notes here, and thank you guys for putting up with this podcast so far. I've been just absolutely enjoying the hell out of it, getting to do it every week so far for these last couple weeks, and I can't wait to do more. Please check it out after the fact on YouTube and all that. Share it with some friends if you're having fun and you want some of your other D&D friends to get involved. That would be amazing. And if you haven't seen the first episode, go back and check that out as well. I think that is it for today. If you guys would like to see any of your favorite monsters discussed, or any campaign settings, D&D books, anything like that, we're going to talk about all of it, all the D&D news, previous editions, anything that just kind of piques my interest as far as being a DM, running the game, coming up with how to homebrew stuff for your campaign. All of it I'm into, and just game design in general as far as it relates to tabletop games. So yeah, I'm excited that you guys are all going to try to keep up. We've got some soon to be learning DMs in the chat. That's very exciting. I hope to see more of that. Please leave comments on the YouTube if you want to see anything talked about on the show, or if you're just enjoying it. I want to do a quick shout out to my friend Tweedler92 on Instagram. He did all of these amazing graphics and visuals, and all of my emotes and all of the other visuals that you ever see on my Twitch channel. If you come check it out, big shout out to him, Tweedler. Thank you very much. Tweedler92 on Instagram. He does commissions for all this stuff. He's incredible. He's been a friend of mine for probably 15 years, and he's just one of the best artists that I've ever had the privilege of knowing and working with. So big thanks to him. I love the design of the channel, and I've just been super happy with it. So thank you all again, and I think that's going to be it. If you are watching this live, the stream will not be ending. I will be ending the podcast. We'll be continuing the stream. I'm going to switch over and play a little bit of some Magic the Gathering. I've been grinding some of the competitive ranked ladder system in that game. So stick around if you're on the stream, and if you're checking this out on YouTube, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.